Can everyone hear me? All right, you guys excited? Don't sound excited. Come on, I'm in New York. Oh, you guys are listening. Well, should we get started?
Well, let's give, let's see, we have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. Let's give them just a couple more minutes. People really arrive right on the minute.
Gotcha.
So it is 6:10, but we'll give one more minute and let's jump into these questions because, yeah, let's start. So actually, we're gonna start just because we have a lot to do, not because I want to like cut anyone off on entry, but. Yeah, let's get started because we're gonna start out with a couple questions today. But yeah, would you like to have a first word before we jump into this evening?
Yeah,
So,
sure.
these are our esteemed guests. As I was saying to some of you all, they have come from Philadelphia to see you all tonight, and I think they are a excellent example of ethical tech in our ethical tech explorations. So I'm very happy and pleased that you, and if you can all just, we're going to introduce everyone, but just if all raise your hands, everyone can see how many people actually came up today. There's 8 members. So yeah, welcome everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so let's get started. So actually, I just wanted let's jump to the second question and just have you each say your name, your work position, and one of the roles that you take in your space, which is Ex Machina Parlor. So just to do a quick introduction all around.
You can start if you want.
You're so nice.
All right, so I'm Leo. I'm one of the 2 Leos in the delicate 2-Leo balancing system. That is the other Leo. Yeah, I'm just sort of a generalist. I help around the space with whatever projects are available. My position is I am a senior security architect. That generally just means I look at people's designs and tell them where there's potential issues and hopefully work with them to make sure those issues don't make it into production or what have you. Yeah, that's it.
My name is Lexi Tatch. I am a cybersecurity researcher. At the space, I do a lot of management of the projects that we run and some of the conferences that we go to. By the way, our space is called the Ex Machina Parlor, so from the Machina Parlor. We run our little hacker space in an area near Chinatown in our city of Philadelphia. We do things from 3D printing to laser cutting to building robots and robots for specific purposes, so we can research and see what the extent of certain technologies are.
Okay. Hi, I'm the other Leo. How's everyone doing tonight? As far as position goes, I am do cybersecurity for medical devices, a lot of things like pacemakers, insulin pumps, things like that. I got started with Ex Machina. We founded the space probably about 2 years ago at this point. As Lex was saying, the idea is it's a hacker space / maker space / social club. After COVID happened, a lot of the different meetup groups in and around Philadelphia were really decimated. We didn't have a lot of people to pick them up. So the 3 of us got together because we were each running our own little different cybersecurity meetups. We decided to all go in on this space, and we've been running that ever since. My role in all of this is a lot of just support. I help come in doing a lot of organizing, both organizing amongst the group with different meetups that we do, as well as actually organizing the space because you have to clean, you have to put everything in. You have a lot of people coming in and working, and places need a home.
Engineers are messy.
Yes, hackers are messy. To that note, Ex Machina, we try to run this as sort of an umbrella organization. We have a lot of smaller orgs underneath of it. Some of the other things that we do as well is we run Tool Philadelphia, which is the open organization of lockpickers. Those of you who might not know, lockpicking and cybersecurity really go hand in hand. Locksport as a general got to start with hackers. We also run the DEF CON group, which is another cybersecurity meetup. In addition to doing all our robotics and network security research. I'll open it up to our other members.
I'm one of the interns at EMP, and currently I am working on a front end project for the new website?
Um, I'm a volunteer cybersecurity student and just working on learning that stuff, running the cameras.
Hi, I'm Wayne. I am a cybersecurity consultant. In reality, that means I wear a lot of hats. Right now, my area of focus is AI and data security. And at the lab, I kind of just float around and do coding work for a lot of the back end stuff.
I think your work is in the thing Robert, right?
Yeah, no, I contributed.
Pleasure.
Okay, hi, I'm down on the floor. I do. I'm Sasha. I also volunteer. I do a lot of the kind of hardware stuff. Um, Mechanical engineer trained, controls engineer also something I do in my spare time.
I'm Evan. I handle various events and then fabrication for state high school.
Great, thank you. And yeah, these are our amazing students in the class. And I think one thing that is great about your space though is it is like truly open to the public, right? So, in fact, if any of you ever technically wanted to visit the space at some point, that is a possibility. Is that right?
Yeah, that is correct. If you're ever in Philly, if you're ever near Chinatown trying to get food, if you want to come by, get some prayer real quick, see some of the stuff and projects we got going on, please feel free to stop by. We are on Google Maps, and yeah, we're on the 5th floor of our building.
My next question for our guests is a pretty big question. So we did talk about this because in line with this course, which is ethics in media, technology, and design, my question is, in your opinion, what is ethical tech? And I was hoping I could hear from a couple of you, of your group.
It's such a panel question. I feel like that's something that you could talk about for 10, 15 minutes. We were getting into a debate about that before the class started. Because I had said the old line that I feel that there is no real ethical tech. It's ethical people. But that is a cop out line. It's such a throwaway because there's obviously tech out there that is not ethical. There's things like facial recognition or autonomous drones being used in warfare that are having trouble distinguishing between targets. I don't know. It's very much a loaded question. I think ethical tech, if we had to sum up with it, it is stuff that objectively makes people's lives better and not worse. If I had to put an answer to it, but I don't know if my compatriots have different ideas.
Yeah, I agree with that sentiment. When I think of ethical tech, I think of technology that can be used to help better people and society and just the way we live our culture. It's like you said, there can be ethical people in position or non-ethical people in positions building technology that inevitably could not benefit others. But I believe it's a responsibility of people, especially in the field of tech and engineering, to understand what you should be able of what would help people versus what wouldn't. And again, it can be very divided, and it can be a hard thing to define. But if it helps people, I think it's ethical.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have much to say to that, much to add to that. But also, I'll just say that sometimes we can have good intent, but then the real world applications or the people using the technology can warp it. So it's one of those things where even with perfect intent and perfect execution, the real world is a messy place. And so, yeah, just if it makes the world a better place, good, but maybe humans make everything a little weird.
That's why we have regulations
That's why we have
and
regulations.
guidelines. We make those things there because if we go past certain boundaries, if we go past certain ethics, then is the technology really benefiting anyone other than, you know, before its original intent is what I would say.
And I think those are very. Oh, did you
No,
want to
no,
add to that?
I didn't know if Sasha or any of our others had anything they want to chime in with.
I think that there's also a thing of yes, but what people, helping what people do what. There's like it kind of this question is hard because I think it implies a almost platonic sense of what technology is, which is kind of impossible to. Technology is not something you can divorce from its creation and history and use case and intention and everything that caused it to be created. So kind of asking what is ethical technology just kind of then just becomes what is ethics.
Yeah.
That's what we're also working on here together.
Yeah.
So don't worry, we don't have to do that part of it. We can get to like the meme workshop as well. So, but this is a great group of students. I'm so happy to work with them because the group of graduate students that you have in this room come from very wide backgrounds. Some already work in tech. Some of you work in media, journalism, are interested to work in national security on different security topics. Obviously, we're in international affairs, right? So this is important for a lot of you, but very wide interests in media, technology, security, privacy, and safety. And so I think for some people here, they might not know too much yet about cybersecurity or robotics. And I think what is the first thing that, or just like a general, I mean, it's hard to pick a first thing that you should learn to understand the work, but I guess maybe one tiny piece of advice you have for people just getting started out.
People getting started out in cybersecurity.
Cybersecurity, I mean, well, remember, you all kind of represent like this mixed use space, right? So I think you could even represent some of the different facets of your space. So
Like software.
yeah, software,
like hardware.
cybersecurity,
Yeah.
Like where to start, right?
makerspace. Yeah.
So, can I take a step? Yeah. Just because I've had this discussion a bunch of times. So I think of the three of us, I've been helping people get into the space for a little longer than all y'all, and I've had this discussion a bunch of times with senior people and stuff like that. And like, it's really interesting because the question is different for every person. Because you're asking, how do I get to Timbuktu, and like I would ask you, where are you starting, right? And like, what is that? Because your path is going to be different depending on where you start and where you're trying to go, right? So, what do you need to learn tomorrow that'll make your life easier going forward? Well, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to be red team, blue team? Are you just trying to understand it? If you're trying to understand the entire thing, I'd say don't be shy and go to a B-Sides or a John Con or one of the conferences. If you specifically have a destination in mind that's red teaming, then go talk to red teamers. Actually, let me change my advice. Go talk to people. But then consider everything else I just said.
Yeah. I mean, for me, the biggest thing, and it sort of ties into what you were saying, is by nature, hackers are curious. Full stop. If you do not have curiosity, then you're not really learning. You're not observing. You're not wondering what makes something kick. You're not wondering what happens if I take this apart, or what happens if I try to use this beyond its intended use case. It's like Leo was saying, like, yeah, everybody's starting point is going to be different. It depends on what it is that you're trying to get out of it. Do you want to explore? Do you want to defend? Do you want to attack? Do you want to just learn? Each one of those is going to have a different starting point and like different senses of like reading material or coursework and stuff to go through. But the best thing that you can do is be curious and talk to people. Like we are socially awkward. Like tropes exist for a reason. But yeah, like get out and talk with people and like explore, see what they're about, see if any of that meshes with your shared experience, like how you've lived, and if that's something that you would want to explore further on. I'm sure that whoever it is that you're talking to could give you their own experience, and maybe you can draw on that.
Yeah, so like for me, I also like so I think of it from the intersection of like what I enjoy to do and what I'm good at. Um, so like I enjoy robots, I enjoy mechanics, I enjoy hardware, but I'm good at like coding and security and systems engineering. And sometimes those things don't always go hand in hand, and it took me a long time to figure out like where those sort of interests and talents can align. If you can figure out what you want to do, and then also like what your capabilities are, you know, you have the ability to kind of intersect those things, regardless if you think it's even there or not. 5 years ago, if you were to tell someone, I have an idea for a drone that can take over other drones, or I guess 10 years ago, they'd think it's something out of a sci-fi movie, or maybe they wouldn't. But um, it's not something that we commonly said. Fast forward now, with current events and the world as it is, that's a commonplace um, system now, especially in certain global events. You know, technology tends to evolve quickly, and even if you think it might not be there today, you could be the one to make it there tomorrow.
I'm gonna end on one question so that we can start the next part of the main part of the evening on time. But this is just sort of actually more of a sustainability question, which is that obviously in maker spaces and hacker spaces, we have a lot of e-waste. So I know this is like maybe something like that wouldn't like immediately come to mind, but I think how do you balance the urgency of the need for like sustainability while still being like innovative?
What's your handle again?
Yeah, so my handle, if you just see up there, is Trash Panda. So one of the things we do is we recycle things people give us, things we find in places. I don't think we've ever thrown anything away if we could avoid throwing it away.
That sounds like hoarding, but it's not.
It's not. It's
I
not.
swear,
It's not
hoarding.
hoarding. No, it's not hoarding. But also, I was joking that there's somebody in Philadelphia who runs a solar punk hackerspace, and if you're coming down to Philadelphia to see us, go down to see them too. Um, it's called Iffy Books, and one of the things they do is they will recycle e-cigarette batteries, and then use that for powering um, law, LoRa radios paired with solar panels, so that you end up with a system that is using a solar panel, a reclaimed battery, and has a range of about 2 miles, right? And so I think we take a lot of that spirit in what we do, although we do end up using new components a lot too. Mostly we repair everything. We tear down things that people have thrown away so we can get more components. We generally try to not let anything go to waste.
Yeah, like even our robots here are made of different components that were either donated or salvaged in certain places.
I mean, even if we're talking about like energy consumption, I know it's a bit tangential to the question, but if you think about what we're doing with 3D printers, so like the machine that we're going to show you is the chassis, the wheels, basically everything except for the electronic components themselves. It's all 3D printed. Um, and that may not seem like a lot, but if you think about it in terms of infrastructure as well, or so much transportation, being able to print our own parts, whether it's for robotics, whether it's for toys, whether it's even clothing, like we printed sandals, things like that. That is one thing that we've done on location that has a smaller carbon footprint than, say, having it shipped in from overseas and then having to have it trucked all the way across the United States. So I know that's a bit tangential. We haven't done a lot with, like, say, energy consumption or other materials in, say, like recycling. I'm just trying to tie it back into what the
Oh yeah,
Okay.
no,
But
I
we
think
do
these
have
are all
plans.
really interesting considerations.
For filament recycling.
yes, filament recycling. What were some of the other ones that we had?
Rapid recycling in Philadelphia as well. There are those three recycling plants that would hand sort certain items that aren't directly recyclable at home, and we own them to areas or artists that might be able to make use out of them. And most cities have a nonprofit similar to that to allow for more hands-on recycling of the specific products.
Yeah, and here you all have access to material for the arts, where a lot of the city's, trash gets sent. And there are a couple organizations like this. You can even go volunteer at some organizations, and they'll like pay you in scraps. So you can get
Do
like.
they take volunteers from Philadelphia?
So,
It's not even a joke.
but with that said, let's get started. And just 2 notes for like the way we'll operate. One, I think if there's something that you have for the group to see, then it sounds like that you guys will kind of move it over here, and you can feel free to like get up and get closer to the item. And then we've left some questions time for questions at the end, but also as we move throughout, is it okay if people ask questions?
Yep.
Okay, great.
That's perfectly fine. All I would say is just be careful with some of our stuff.
Great. So we'll kind of keep the first row. We'll put things for people to see in like the second row here, since no one's really sitting in the second row. I'll go some
Anything we want to
It's not over here.
anything we want to distribute now, or wait till after?
We'll kind of wait for a little bit.
Okay.
Because I'm gonna go through some slides first, just to kind of give some background and a little bit of context to why we built some of this stuff. So yeah, I've already introduced myself, but my name is Lexi Tatch. I work in cyber and tech and development for the past 10 years. Did pretty much most jobs from like IT analyst to vertical teaming to SCADA and OT, and currently going to ML and AI for some of my projects. I presented at DEF CON twice and a few other conferences, security conferences across my city. And I'll also be presenting at the Women in Cybersecurity Conference in April in Dallas. So, we sort of touched on this a little bit. Why cyber and why I think at least is why it's kind of cool and why we continue to hack things. Like Cuff said, inherently, like we are curious people by nature. We want to understand how something works, how to use it for other purposes. Cybersecurity is an integral part of our lives, whether we know it or not. And with especially innovations of technology, we also need to make sure that we have certain boundaries, right? We have AI machine learning systems. We can also use them to differentiate people. It's the question of ethical tech. Security, at least for me, falls in the category of that buffer zone where you have new technology and you have probable events that might happen if you don't really handle it correctly or you just kind of go wild with it. That's why I do, say, security testing for some systems, and I make things that I think, whether or not they have a use now, they might be useful later. So, what is a robot? According to ISO 8373, it's a system and a mechanism that's programmable with 2 or more axes of degrees of motion and autonomy. It's a system that can either be controlled or autonomous or manipulated to do a certain task or some kind of process or movement. For our little bot here. So we have these wheels that, it's pretty straightforward. It's supposed to go back and forth, but we can program things to move it, left and right by simply changing the bits of code. That's part of the reason why we sort of hacked into it. We made our own code for it, and we, learned how to use it. And so now we want to use it for something else. Yeah, so my computer might be disconnected from the internet at the moment. There's actually supposed to be a picture of a robot dog on there. So there's a company in Philly called Ghost Robotics. They build quadruped robots that are currently licensed to Department of Homeland Security and other places. They have one specific system known as the NEO unit, which is designed to jam all wireless frequencies and protocols within an area. So, you know, in the event that certain people are going into a raid, all communications is cut off. And so it's a question of like, you know, is it ethical? Is it right? You know, cut off all connections to everyone in that vicinity. We tend to think of like networks as like our Wi-Fi or cellular devices, but there's also IoT, pacemakers, medical systems. There's not enough data yet to really say whether that system affects those units, but again, it's I bring that up because it's, you know, a question of is it right or is it wrong to use that type of system when going into raids or apprehending people. So this is another example of me forgetting to turn on the Wi-Fi, but I talked about this a little bit before with the increased you know, military conflict in Russia and Ukraine. The advancements of drones has drastically increased over the past year or so, to the point where it's now part of certain playbooks and tactics. Ukraine has its own autonomous drone units, so does Russia. There's also countermeasure units now. It's wedged itself into its own degree of modern warfare. And again, that's technology advancing and innovating at a pace that, whether we know it or not, you know, we try to regulate, we try to advise, but if we don't do it enough, it can go out of proportion very quickly. So I want to take just a quick break. If there's any questions, we're going to start setting up the demo for the actual robot. But we can start passing around our prototype unit that's in over there. Yep. So that's one unit. If you want to come by, or yeah, you can just pass it around, and we're gonna slowly get started.
So while Lex is setting up, just wanted to talk about some of the things that, some of the background for this project, right? So Lex mentioned she previously presented at DEF CON. Her first presentation, if I recall correctly, was using a rather fancy drone. And one of the pieces of feedback she received, and sort of the inspiration for the new Marauder, was that, well, not everybody's going to have access to a fancy drone. So when we were developing this, Lex was really mindful of trying to figure out, you know, what hardware is everyone going to have access to? What can we really do cheaply, right? So as you're going through there, what is currently in that robot is a Raspberry Pi, right? So this is built off of a lot of like, so Raspberry Pi and a bunch of coding modules that now that we've packaged it all together, you could have it running in a day, assuming you had the 3D printed components, right? So what Lex basically did was go from, oh, this is really fancy proprietary drone, to now I have a rover that I can get up and running in like $100 worth of parts, right? Which is great if you're trying to get into robotics and trying to figure it out, right? And so the other interesting thing is we determined that the Raspberry Pi could interface with a lot of other technology very easily, right? So,
Leo, sorry to interrupt. Could I just ask one quick clarifying question? Just in case anyone here hasn't spent too much time with the Raspberry Pi.
Sure, I apologize for.
No, it's fine. So just real quick, how would, you know, when we define Raspberry Pi, would you mind mind just adding that for the students?
Yeah.
And by the way, you guys can borrow Raspberry Pis free of charge from our makerspace, the one you visited today.
Some of us did.
So-
Sorry. Yeah, so Raspberry Pi, came out like 10, 15 years ago, right?
I think so.
It's basically like a very small, cheap computer, right? So, it's one of the favorite toys of hackers because if you have a $100 computer, all of a sudden there's all these other use cases. I would never take my laptop and leave it someplace in the field to observe something, but I can do that with a Raspberry Pi because if I get a nice watertight case, worst case scenario, I lose $100, right? And so what you find is this entire ecosystem of really cool projects running on Raspberry Pis. Because $100 for the Raspberry Pi, some 3D printing, 20 and 30 bucks for additional components, and you can do anything, take measurements of the environment, cameras, other sensors, what have you. Sorry, I think you have a question.
Where did the name come from? Raspberry Pi.
Do you remember? I know that it's a British company. They were naming it after Raspbian, I think.
Raspbian. Okay, yeah. So yeah, it runs an OS called Raspbian. Is that an Adafruit?
I don't know. I don't think
Yes.
Adafruit came out with it.
Oh no, Adafruit is the
No, Adafruit is the circuits, not the.
Yeah, they're the one that made all the hacks for it. I was going to say, can we break open the pin controller, the one that's going around, so people could actually see what the Raspberry Pi
I got
looks like?
disconnected.
Yeah, you can do that.
It's already
Fine, we'll just say the top.
Yeah, so I mentioned it was Raspberry Pi, but also there is a robotics control pad on top of the Raspberry Pi.
So, all the Raspberry Pi is, think of it as just a small computer. This is basically how powerful your machine was back in the late 90s, early 2000s. Each one of these is a fully fledged computer. It can do everything from having 4 USB ports. It has an onboard Ethernet port. It will have its own power supply. It even allows you to have peripherals if you want to hook this up to a monitor and have a keyboard. It is for all intents and purposes a miniature computer. And because of its form factor, it has a number of what we call GPIO inputs, which are basically allowing you to put any type of hardware onto it. You can see on this one, and I'll pass this around again, but this white board that's on top of the green board, we call these hats. There's a bunch of different types of hats that are out there. Some of them can be used for controlling robotics, that's robotics one. Some of them for checking the temperature or the humidity. We've built ones in the past that you would use inside of a beehive if you wanted to check temperature, humidity, carbon dioxide levels. Back when beehives were first starting to die out and we didn't know a lot about colony collapse disorder, I'd actually built a small instrument with a couple of friends to sort of measure the stuff inside of the beehive, because we had a friend who was in the apiary and he was trying to figure out why his bees were dying off. That is not something that existed out in the real world. Or if it did, it would have cost thousands of dollars. We were able to build it with off-the-shelf components for about $100. The Raspberry Pi that we used was at maybe $30, $35. And then you just go on to sites like Adafruit.
Sorry, just testing.
Oh, yeah. We're all sort of computers now. But you can go out there now for such a good prototypical market for basically building your own solutions to whatever, however esoteric your problem is.
These boards are so commonplace nowadays that often you never see a random screen or electronic flash on your Facebook, whether it be a advertisement screen at a movie theater or a screen network bus other than SI. There's a non-zero chance that if it ever flashes, you'll see the logo of the Raspberry Pi pop up because that's often the computing system that they use as the backend.
Yeah, and I know we're just sort of buying some more time to talk more about this. If anybody was actually interested in this, we can give you plenty of resources for where you could buy kits. They sell them anywhere from like $30 all the way up to the stars, and it can be full instruction booklets for like how to make a stereo system. If you want to make like a door closer for your bedroom, like a locket, what have you. There is all sorts of projects that you can do. You don't need to worry about things like soldering or knowing voltages. You don't need to be an electrical engineer in order to start working with these types of materials. They're so consumer friendly that I do them with my kids. I have 9-year-old son and 11-year-old daughter, and we will go through and make cars. We will make solar panels. We will make little boom boxes. We will do just all sorts of things that, again, like trying to spark their curiosity so that they, in turn, can go and make their own little machines, whatever they want to do. So, yes, absolutely.
So you said hackers like to utilize Raspberry Pis.
Mhm.
Do they like change the hats off of them? Do they like
So it depends, I guess, on what the problem is that we're trying to solve. The hats are, if you're going to build a permanent project, the hat tends to wind up being a part of that project. Does that make sense? So if your foundation is almost always going to be the same, think of the foundation of your house, it's always going to be the Raspberry Pi. But then do you want to have like a ranch style house? Do you want to have a 2-story house? Once you put like those on there and that like becomes its intended use, you probably won't mess with it anymore because the software that you also put on that Raspberry Pi is expecting that hardware, that X to use it. If you start like changing around hats or whatever, unless you have like really good software that's going to detect those, you're probably going to be just repurposing for another project like that. Yeah, so think of the hats as sort of semi-permanent modules that you're putting into your computer.
But on the flip side, a Raspberry Pi is so easy to switch out. You could probably just switch the SD card and then,
Yeah, you kind of just changing the project around. You're changing its intended use.
if you pull the hat off, you have to then also pull the OS and put in a different OS. But Raspberry Pis are so, the Raspberry Pi OS will sit on an SD card, which means you can have a couple dozen SD cards if you wanted to be swapping hats and OSs at the same time.
There's actually, if you were to, I can share links with it because again, like I realize that we are in the business of knowing this. There's actually, what was the consumer electronics show, CES.
Yes.
So CES, Consumer Electronics Show. Those of you who don't know, it's for like all the big companies like Sony, Samsung. Oh, this is our latest phone. This is our latest television. One of the big things that came out of CES this year was people were actually doing modular hardware for phones. So the idea that right now all of our phones, if this breaks, I have to go and buy a new one. I can't really fix this myself because everything is soldered onto it. There are a number of hackers who got really fed up with this practice at like Apple and Samsung of like, oh, just give us another $800 for that new phone. They went back to the drawing board, and because consumer electronics have become so what's the word I'm looking for? What's that? Yeah, I guess just the idea that they are so powerful, they're so much more powerful than what you would get from like an industrial supplier like Apple or Samsung, that they start making their own phones that have the same form factor that you would see from any mainstream like Galaxy or iPhone. But they wanted to have that modularity with it, so you could actually take your bottom touchscreen off and put on a gamepad. You wanted to turn it into a Game Boy, or take it off and put a keyboard on it. It would have the same form factor as the old Blackberries. So like the idea of being able to change like those tabs, that there is like real world examples for this. And I'll show you that if you want to see like videos of it. It's really neat, like how they sort of solve that particular problem from a phone standpoint.
That was a great breakout session. That was like the breakout session from the break slide, right?
Yeah.
Thank you so much. So, and also this semester, a little later on, because we received some funding for this class from the climate school, we're also going to spend a little time like using some of those technologies and do like a basic workshop where not only are we going to like kind of like fix or like kind of like work with either something like a Raspberry Pi or just like a basic repair, like repair a circuit. But this also goes back to some legislation in New York, which is called the right to repair.
Yes.
Yes. So
And the right to repair act is very much huge in the inspiration for that code that I was talking about. Just the idea that anybody should be able to do it with one screw driver.
All right, we're back in action. So we're gonna be presenting our project that we presented at DEFCON, the Tenku Marauder, where we try to combine robotics and cybersecurity. So the initial conception of the system actually came from another project the year before called the Strix Interceptor, This was a drone I built to intercept other drones and take them down with different RF systems or acoustic units. I was using Dragon OS in a form of with the robotic operating system. Dragon OS is a software-defined radio operating system with different tools, different applications. People can use it to just do like monitoring, assessments. I actually talked to the lead developer, and he's a pretty cool guy. And I used a 3DR X8 drone that I got from Carnegie Mellon. There's actually one that's being tossed out, so kudos for e-waste recycling. You know, sometimes some people throw out some pretty interesting things. I don't recommend going dumpster diving, but you know, it's up to you.
I recommend it.
Not officially.
However, that iteration of the system had a lot of its own issues, especially when it came to programming and interoperability. It was really complex. It was very, very large. It was very expensive, and it wasn't just something any regular person could just pick up, use, and be ready to go. There wasn't really there was a huge cliff to go over before you even got to that point. So that's why we went ahead to develop the Tango Marauder. The new goal was to make a more accessible platform for relatively anyone to use. The design, the parts, code, they're open source, and you can 3D print the actual robot, including the wheels, the frame, the shell. Really, all you need is a Raspberry Pi and the motor shield, and you're basically good to go. You know, a lot of robotic kits, especially for kids, start off with your basic systems, your wheels, your motors, your control board. This sort of takes it a little bit of a step further, but still in that same vein, where even if you don't have as much experience in this realm of technology, you can certainly like take it out, print it out, and try to build it yourself. It's not a huge cliff to jump as before. So I wanted this to be a way for people to kind of test new products, new systems, and for me, since I work in security, I wanted to see if I could do this similar scenario of disabling a drone. So this is more of a warning for when we were back at DEF CON, so it seems a little specific. Just be aware, it was for a very different audience back then. But obviously, you know, if you attempt to replicate any of this or do it in a way that is unauthorized or it's on a system that you own, we don't have liability on that, and it's on you.
And as a former SOC analyst for Temple University, don't mess with your campus's security. Just make a lot of work for them.
They may figure it out.
They will definitely try to figure it out.
They will. Just don't try to play it too hard. Because the FCC and the FAA have their own rules regarding any sort of tampering, especially when it comes to UAS systems or unmanned aerial systems. For those of you who may not know, 49 USC 4480 defines a counter UAS system capable of lawfully disabling drones or disrupting them. The reason why I have this up is because if you attempt to do any of this, make sure to know your local laws and rules. Because just FYI, if you're doing testing and you do it in a place where you shouldn't, local law enforcement or DHS or the FAA can, you know, kind of figure out where you are, and they're not going to be happy. Just FYI. There's also a lot of fees involved with testing unauthorized systems.
And just because this isn't DEF CON, the CFAA is also not a fun one to run over. That's the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. It's usually the one that they use when they like do really, really extreme sentencing for hackers. So there's a lot of reasons why you shouldn't play with this. I want to be very careful. You shouldn't play with this in environments you're not sure that you are safe to play with this.
And that's not to say like you can't at all. Like I know it might seem a little scary at first. we're only saying this stuff because sometimes people, like I said, can kind of go gung ho without actually thinking about like what they're doing. You launch this Wi-Fi scanning attack, and you're somebody with a Wi-Fi pacemaker. Well, what happens? That's probably not something you want to do. So, play it safe. So, yep, the Tengu Marauder, our little autonomous two-wheeled robot, which right now is a little jacked up, but we'll get to that. It's got a Raspberry Pi, Ubuntu 22.04. It is running, and it does have an ESP32 Marauder, which, for those of you who are not aware of what the ESP32 is, it is a small circuit board that can be modified. It has a Wi-Fi chip with 2.4. So it can be modified to do all sorts of things. It can connect your home devices. It can create webcams. It's the basis of learning for a lot of people getting to like just hardware in general. In our case, the ESP32 Marauder is a specific hardware designed to analyze or deauthenticate Wi-Fi systems. Again, if you do testing, do it right. So, yeah, the hardware is pretty straightforward. We're running just the Python scripts from the APIs of the actual robot app, but we're also connected into the Marauder itself, the ESP32 that's on top of that robot. Obviously best practices, do this on networks that you are authorized to do so, do this in an area that you have secure testing.
Hi, thank you, sorry to interrupt. I have a quick question. On the previous slide, you mentioned the ESP32 circuit board authenticates Wi-Fi. Is that used for a certain intent? Like if there was like a bad actor, they would want to deauthenticate?
So
Okay.
there's different forms of Wi-Fi attacks, and I'm sorry, I should have gone through that. Deauthentication is one of them. Deauthentication means you are essentially removed from that network, so it blankets your signal out. Sniffing is another form of like essentially when you're snooping in packets that are active on a Wi-Fi network. That chip is capable of doing both of those things if modified correctly. But again, it's an actor would use these, say, in like reconnaissance or assessment of a network. So if I were a pen tester inside of a hospital or a business, I'd want to understand like how everything kind of connects to each other, and if there's little gaps inside of those networks. So if I deauthenticate one user, can I just go into their system and wreak havoc, or can I keep pivoting into other systems? It gives you a foothold, is what I would say.
And pen tester, of course, being short for penetration testing. And in the case of larger organizations, of course, you may have the capabilities to be doing this. Obviously, for some small businesses, it could be very difficult to be having this sort of amount of resources, right? But if you can, it's great to have.
Right. So I'm going to do my best to show off the motion control with the system. It's a little.
Should people stand up or come a little
If they
closer?
I recommend if you're a little farther away, this might be easier to show you a little bit
Maybe
closer.
just like avoid the middle here, where like all the wire ties, and then go to
think
the
you're
left
running
side
away.
or the right side.
Oh,
It's still running.
is this able to be capped? Do we cap?
think one of the major things that we also need to communicate, especially to this audience, in regards to cybersecurity and robotics, is that I think from the average person to the technical, like people that are technically proficient in the field, there's a massive knowledge gap in when the people that can be affected by this kind of technology is mostly everyone, especially given the proliferation of like mobile phones and everything. So especially when they're like designing policy or thinking about ethics, it's important to recognize the like kind of insane disparity between those who are in the know and those who are like either like through not like systematic franchise or
Technology significantly advanced is no different than magic.
okay, yeah.
What that means, though, is we here who study with this, we know where the gaps in the system are. We know its strengths and its weaknesses, or at least how to probe for those types of things. But for people who are not in the know, it can be very difficult because you don't know where to start. You don't know what questions to even ask to try to figure out how do you try to disable a system like this.
And that's why I love lockpicking, because it's something that I could teach you in 20 minutes and then it'll change your perspective on a lot of things. Because if you haven't picked locks, you look at a lock and you're like, oh, it's secure. But if you've actually done some lock picking, you'll know, oh, okay, well, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to jiggle components, and if I turn and move the right components in the right way, it'll just open because I'm simulating a key. And then if you go down the path of lockpicking a little bit more, if you start carrying lockpicks with you, and now it's not so much that you're so much more knowledgeable than the average person, but you know about it and you were prepared to exploit it, which now completely separates you from like 90% of the people.
Now, Leo, if someone in this classroom to come visit you in Philadelphia at this space, would you teach them that 20-minute lockpicking class?
Yeah, absolutely.
I have all my lockpicks with me now. I could show them in 5 minutes.
But also keep in mind, we are a community, and New York has some wonderful communities. I think Evan was telling us Hack Manhattan hosts a tool. So if you go to Hack Manhattan or any of that's TOOOL, the organization of lockpickers. There's also 2600, the hacker meetup.
Yeah.
Like most hackers are pretty friendly, and they'll just like talk to you about their passions, right?
I know both of them. They are both great. Hack Manhattan actually runs out of what used to be like a bar space, which was the Fat Cat, where you could play like ping pong, and they expanded to like a hacker space. And 2600 to this day still has a monthly meetup. And they just had the Hope Conference, which was here in New York City. So that's a great conference to go to as well. But Hope, yeah, sorry, go ahead, back to you.
Yeah, I was just making sure that I was
Wait,
correct.
Lex, hold on. There's one question in the corner.
Oh, I can ask it later.
Yeah, let's keep going. We have like an hour, so.
Gotcha. So yeah, I'm sorry. It's like got its guts spilling out right now. But here we go. The battery was charged enough. So we have a script to just do a basic motor control test. Am I able to go forward, backwards, left, right, stop? And it's pretty straightforward script.
It's running over its own umbilical cord.
Now imagine there's 2 wheels as well.
There is 2 wheels, so it does move. One issue I had to do is I had to invert the polarity of one of the motors to make it actually go straight, because at the time I didn't actually know what straight was. So sometimes you have to modify code to actually make it do the thing you want it to do. Otherwise, you'll have that. It's doing its best. But yeah, that's kind of the script we have for motor control. The next one after that was the actual demo part itself.
Oh, great.
Yep. We do have a Wi-Fi enabled drone, the DJI Tello, which is a pretty easily accessible commercial drone. Also very common. Yep.
We talked about DJI last week since it is such a common and beloved drone. but also could possibly be banned within like the
Yes.
Yes.
So it's kind of important to note, like before we were getting a question about Wi-Fi beyond the tax.
You want to go ahead
Some
and
of
stick
these
this out?
technologies make use of Wi-Fi, right? So like Wi-Fi
Ready when you
beyond
are,
the
Lisa.
tax, like, yeah, it's annoying on a network and it could get your foothold. But sometimes these technologies use Wi-Fi because it's just a widely available protocol that is cheap. And in those situations, you get the situation like Sasha was talking about, where somebody with malicious intent who just knows the technology a little bit better than a layperson will ruin your day and crash your drones form, right? Like because they can.
Or even your small business. Like,
Or your small
backend,
business,
like,
right? Yes.
It is so. It's something that we're like, the average person does not understand how quickly digital attacks can scale.
Right.
Like it is much easier once you have a piece of like cybersecurity, once you've developed a cybersecurity threat to implement it, when you are going up against someone who has no defenses.
The hardware is also just accessible in a way that is everywhere. The same ESP32 that can do Bluetooth attacks here is the chip that's used for your Bluetooth-enabled LED lights at home. So it's not that anything here is special, it's just that a lot of things are secured through obscurity, which doesn't mean it lasts.
Ready when you are.
So right now I'm connected to the device that's actually on top of the robot Snowscast, which is the ESP32 Marauder. Right now I have scanned Wi-Fi access points currently around the area, and so I will.
Do you want me to launch it?
One sec. All right, I'm gonna just do a quick rescan. When I finish scanning, I'm gonna ask it to show me. It's a little clunky, but
If any of you would like to contribute to open source software.
So I have selected the AP, bring it up.
Uh-oh. Oh. Oh, that's the wrong way. Sorry. Sorry. Oh, sorry. No.
Yeah.
Wait. Oh, shit. Sorry. Wait, I'm landing it. I thought it would hover. It's supposed to just hover. Sorry. Let's try that one more time.
I mean,
Slightly.
it might have been trying to hover.
I don't think so.
You're okay.
It says navigation system error, so it's probably
Okay, yeah.
it's probably having a lighting issue.
Besides the flight issue,
Let's try that one more time.
These are also relatively cheap drones that we're using for educational purposes, so like the precision is not what we would like.
This is our target, you know.
Yeah.
There we go. Other way. There we go. There we go. Okay. That's a little better. Yep.
and give it another couple of seconds. If it's dark, freaking out.
Have you tried to
Oh, wait.
So that keeps running a part of the script on the ESP, so you see that is going to be interfering with the communication to the thing.
Yep.
That could give a summary of that.
2, 3, 4. I really felt
It's trying.
I think the wrong
Somewhere out there, someone's on Facebook.
Okay, so
Oh, did you attack the wrong person?
Yeah.
Oh no.
You know, sometimes things just happen and you know, this is part of the warrior. You're right. Sometimes you get to a bar fight with just one person. Yeah, because I know
Rescanning.
Oh, I think you see. Huh?
By the way, you know in the movie when you see hackers and they go, I mean, it's actually more like this. Like,
Mr. Robot is probably about the sexiest hacking that's on TV. It's not even that good.
I recommend watching it though, still, if you need something to watch on a Saturday.
But yeah, I'm going to retest that series like regularly. Oops, wrong IP, hold on. It's like the number one topic. Okay. There we go.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, finally.
And I am disconnected, so this thing is fully flying on its own.
And the theater came about like 10 minutes.
Depending on what it's, so we were having an issue with the navigation circuit, so I can't connect to it right now. And that's the only evidence of that is that I can't control it at all. I've lost all contact with it. I had a camera feed, it's gone, right? Depending on what the drone decides to do at this point, ordinarily this normal consumer drone will drift once it notices the connection's been gone for like a time, it'll just settle. But for some reason, it's decided to stay aloft. That behavior, depending on like if this were a more complex system, it might have more complex variables. But oh, that's just inexplicable behavior. Oh, there it goes. Oh,
Yeah,
so there you go.
It
We did manage to kill it.
Round of
Great.
applause for.
That was for everyone. I'm sorry. We had quite a few technical difficulties.
Fire is tangled, but yeah, we got there.
That's what happens with technology. Sometimes it works, sometimes it fails on the last minute. But demo gods. Yeah, I agree with demo gods. However, we did end up proving what the initial purpose of the system was, and that was to deauthenticate the drone and basically just force it to the ground. That's pretty much a common practice now in the hotspots in the world. We have systems in place to counteract that, but not everything works. And because we have a pretty huge reliance on especially Wi-Fi devices and internet connected things, these attacks aren't as uncommon as you might think, or not want to think. So, yeah, the whole idea was to kind of just show if if Riley was a remote operator flying a drone out of nowhere, and I came out of nowhere with this thing, it does kind of show a bit of a proof of concept. It doesn't actually take, like I said before, it isn't much to really build this and set it up. Once it's good to go, it's good to go. Again, do things responsibly and have an understanding of your boundaries, and not pick the wrong access point. Yeah, so we already went through the live demo. So it might have been a little weird during the demo, but this thing was able to pick up more than just it's the girl. Still trying to attack the drones down. So there's a lot of things we can do with these types of devices. I mean, that device right there, probably, I think I just flashed it. I bought it off Amazon for $10 and I flashed it with the latest firmware. And that's all it takes for me to be able to scan Wi-Fi access points and get their APs. And then I can see all sorts of networks across the campus. That right there is to basically make a bunch of Wi-Fi access points. Say that. So there's a whole lot you could do with this type of device. It just depends. But again, do it responsibly and only that doesn't harm other people. The ESP32 itself is not more than like $5 on Amazon. Just saying.
And it can do all of this.
Yeah, I can do all of this.
You know what you're doing.
So,
Do a lot of research.
to sort of bring it back to what Lexi was talking about earlier, because she was having issues with showing images on her phone. This here that I'm coming around with on my phone here, this is from Ghost Robotics down in Philadelphia. This is the new autonomous drone that they've called NEO, N-E-O. And this is one that is using this Wi-Fi DOS attack currently now. And what this is doing is police are putting this out here. I'm trying not to get political when I say this. One of the big things that everybody's been putting in their homes lately is Wi-Fi cameras, stuff to basically watch their home while they're not there, which has also been a great tool for if somebody is doing a legal search and seizure of your house, you now have evidence of that. What if the police have a way to run a de-authentication attack on all Wi-Fi devices inside your home? Now it's your word against theirs. What happens if your next door neighbor who happens to have a Wi-Fi controlled insulin pump or pacemaker or some other type of medical device? These Wi-Fi de-authentication attacks really can be non-discriminatory with how much damage they can do. And now you could be caught in basically the turmoil that is befalling your neighbors. So this is sort of technology that we talk about ethics and everything. This is an idea of like an unethical use of, arguably, unethical use of these types of technologies. But here we are, like they are out here in the wild. It's not somewhere over in some war zone. This is here in like the United States. It's happening now. Like these are considerations that have to be taken.
Yep. Yeah, that's all I really need to show for the demo. Feel free to take your seats if you want to. So there was a lot of, I mean, there still is a bunch of issues right now. But for the project itself, we had some challenges. I have spent many endless nights trying to break my head over some code that I still cannot fully understand. Especially when it comes to hardware and so I'm using a Sunfounder robot hat, which is a pretty common like shield for this Raspberry Pi. And you know, it's relatively not hard to use, but again, like I had this issue last night where they updated their code base for the hardware, and I noticed nothing was working. So I spent a good 5 or 6 hours trying to troubleshoot that, figure out which modules need to be updated and what needs to be reconfigured. So it almost feels like I have to go back to square one, but that's just kind of the nature of the beast. Technology, you know, innovates and expands at a pretty rapid pace, and if you don't keep up with it, you're going to be left in the dust. So, yeah, we had some issues integrating the Pi with USB8266, which is a similar chip, similar to the 32, but not exactly the same. And, you know, we also thought about using Flipper Zero, which does anyone know what a Flipper Zero is? Oh, okay. It's this little cute device. You ever seen a Tamagotchi or like kind of like that? It's like this adorable little penguin or no dolphin. It's a dolphin. Yeah.
It's like a Tamagotchi that was designed to be evil. Right? It's like a Tamagotchi that's just evil.
Around.
It's not evil. It's kind of adorable. It actually gets okay anyway. You can do a lot of things. One of them is copy key cards and wireless devices, IDs, just by getting near it. It can also be added. You can also add different modules to it, like we just did with this robot, adding things for like Wi-Fi, RFID, sub gigahertz antennas, IoT networks. Like you can do a lot of weird things with it if you just try hard enough.
You can turn it into one of those remotes that turns off all TVs.
Oh yeah, it does that.
I keep one in my backpack if I have to go to the doctor's office and I don't feel like watching Fox News that they have playing. I'll just
You change
turn it off.
Or the gym.
Yeah, you could do it.
You could do it. I mean,
All
again,
of that is works off infrared, and with something like the Flipper Zero, it could just have access to all of the infrared spectrum. You can do all sorts of things with it.
and that's kind of why we say know what you're doing, because if you randomly turn off things and not know what's around you, it might not go as well as you think. Especially with that little device. Like I think that device it's pretty commercially available, and it's very common to find in like hacker conferences, along with a whole assortment of different tools. Yeah, so I went on a bit of a tangent there, but we did try integrating that. That one does kind of work, but it's a little weird. Because essentially that's a Raspberry Pi with another Raspberry Pi, somewhat trying to operate in two different like systems. But simpler is better. Use a smaller chip. Don't go too insane with it. Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, things that are relatively within your distance, not affecting other things. Just be aware of that.
How much does the Flipper cost?
150 to 200, depending on like where you go online. I've seen someone actually, a friend of mine who does like stuff on satellites has used it for communications, where you can hook it up to a SATCOM dish and communicate with the ISS, which is weird. But
And from a digital development perspective, and for a lot of people here too are thinking about different technologies, different places, definitely note like the cost of things tonight. Like things are pretty affordable, like what we're looking at, and the kind of how powerful some of these devices could be for not a lot of money. So.
Yep. Our future state is hopefully to transfer it off different protocols that we can better secure. Like, there's the Zigbee protocol, which is 2.4.15. It's a bit deprecated, but you can secure it with pretty decent security protocols.
Zigbee is what you would use for like the Internet of Things. If you ever had like a light bulb that you could control with your phone, that light bulb is going to have like a Zigbee controller inside of it.
Yep. And so we're hoping to do a little bit more with the bot. Obviously when we iron out some of the other issues. Hopefully adding like access to do machine learning training where it can kind of just navigate on its own and just figure out what to do. Who here has a Roomba? Your Roomba, depending on what model it is it can connect to the internet, and it can create a map of your room to better navigate like areas where it can clean stuff. That system, in most traditional cases, is known as LiDAR, which is light radar, where it just bounces off refractions against objects in different areas. So we're hoping maybe one day, because we have a few LiDAR sensors that we can integrate into this little bot if it has enough power. Just see if we can do some other stuff like advanced monitoring, environmental tasks, like a friend of mine who does like small copy systems for like plants, kind of just wants a robot that can self-water or water her plants basically. So she had just a little rover to just kind of move around, water her plants, and just come back. Tells her what happened and how the plants are. It's a thing. There's a whole assortment of projects you can do with the Pi or other small board computers. So, yeah, a little tumultuous, but for the Tengu Marauder, it's a project of ours, especially a passion project of mine, to intersect robotics and cybersecurity, to better understand the terrain that might be coming in the future, whether we like to admit it or not. Use of drones, use of more robots in commercial spaces. Things may rapidly increase, and it's just good to have an understanding of it. especially when as our hackerspace tries to explore those types of technologies. I really want to thank my crew for helping me out and supporting me through this, and thank you all for attending.
We have made such phenomenal time. I cannot believe it. Don't run yet. Yeah. So it's only like our class goes to like 8 o'clock. Can you believe it's only 7:25 p.m.
Yeah.
But let's start with some of your questions. I have a couple questions from the start too that I can circle back to. But I would love to hear from you all. There must be a few questions. Yes. So I'll let you go
Start
ahead.
off with the front.
Okay, I had a quick question about how, I love the example about the pacemakers and the Wi-Fi tech. Wondering about your thoughts on healthcare and how robotics are like in the ER helping surgeons with like, and what maybe those ethics are. Just curious about your point of view.
Yeah, so like I worked in the medical industry in security before, and I have seen really good uses of robotics, especially in the Da Vinci system. For those who may not be aware, the Da Vinci system is a surgical robotic unit capable of doing basically you won't be scarred as much using the fine-tuned tools that are microscopically available for it to like do like sewing and like sewing up wounds and different surgical procedures. It's a really fantastic system, in my opinion. I think that's a great use of ethical technology, especially when you have less scarring on a patient for more invasive procedures like an appendectomy or heart surgeries and cardiac procedures.
Awesome, thank you.
I'm just curious how you got into this field and like what your start looks like.
So I guess I started when I was about 17-ish, when I joined the Air Force right after high school with my parents' permission, and I had to pick a job in a career field, and so one of the earliest available jobs was cyber systems operations, and at first I really hated it. It was definitely tough going through everything and trying to figure out how things worked. I had to get a certification finished before 2 weeks was I did my day-to-day job, and I didn't feel as much enjoyment as other things. But then it's because in my mind I didn't think about is there a way for me to sort of combine two things that may not seem as similar. I grew up watching a lot of anime and manga shows with giant robots, so I loved it. I thought to myself, a couple years down the line, what if I just learned robotics? And at the time I was living in Tokyo, so I was kind of near a center of different types of systems. One of the coolest experiences I've ever had is seeing a drone swarm show of light up drones in the air, creating different shapes, movements, basically replacing fireworks in a way. And it was just so cool to see everything kind of moving in sync with each other and how it operates. And I really wanted to delve into that. So one of my first robotics projects was how do I make a bunch of smaller drones kind of talk to each other and then fly in a pattern. And I guess that's the kid in me. It was just so fascinating to watch that I just kept going. And fast forward to now, it's kind of what I do.
Let's extend that question to your crew as well, because that's a great question. Why did you, what was your initial inspiration that led you to here?
So how did I get into this? Basically, I was always interested in science as a kid, and my folks happened to sign me up for a couple of engineering summer courses. started to fall in love with why things were the way that they were, and just went from there. Me personally, I've always just gone into, I don't know, whatever was in front of me, just diving into it, and I just sort of continued on that path with healthcare and cybersecurity. I've been doing it now for probably about the past 10 or so years. Really, was just trying to recognize opportunities and seeing with what I'd already done, how does it apply to that, and how does it allow me to keep learning. I don't know if any of our other compatriots want to answer the question as well.
Yeah, because some of you are also just starting your careers as well. What is your inspiration?
For me, I don't really like tech. I'm just here for the. I'm just here because the field it has a lot of money and then opportunities for new people coming in, especially in Philadelphia. I go to the school community college (CCP) of Philadelphia. So right now I'm with a program that after I graduate, I have a higher chance of getting hired inside the city of Philadelphia. So yeah, I'm just starting off, and it's just money. I don't really like tech.
Um, I security is one of those things that is a great inlet for understanding how everything technical works. If you understand the way that people have decided to protect something, then you understand a lot of the unnecessary complexities in digital systems, or the way that they seem unnecessary. It's like, why do you do that way? Well, we did it that way because in 1996, a bunch of guys figured out how to use that to steal everything on the computer or whatever it happens to be. So that's one reason. Another reason is that it's one of those things that's just sort of just the more you look into it, it's just arbitrarily complex. Like the more time you spend with it, it grows and grows and grows because it's this competitive endeavor, right?
It never ends in a way.
It never stops growing deeper the deeper you dig. You know, there's no bottom where you understand like, oh, this is how people secure systems. It's just how do people build walls around information they care about. That's a huge question. It's an endless question. It's one people are always trying to answer. It's one that is dependent on cost. It's on hardware, on knowledge, on goals, and everything. So it's just interesting.
And I think there was a question. Was there another hand raised before? I'm not sure.
I have a question. So while I was watching your presentation, I personally realized that there's two ways of looking at this presentation. One is with fear, right? Saying, oh my God, this is so cheap to do, like easy, like there's not a lot of barriers for me to be exposed, basically, right? But the approach you guys are having is that of agency. Hey, look how easy it is to do, therefore, look how easy it is for you to kind of understand the systems and therefore protect yourself better, right? So, thank you so much for the presentation. But also, I would love to hear more about this work that you're doing, putting this sorts of technology that could feel daunting and even you can become apathetic with so much development, and instead giving us a sense of agency and just by the fact of being an open makerspace. So how do you keep fighting for that access of information, and how do you see yourself in the future with that sort of goal in mind?
So one thing we do at our space, and some of us are guilty of not doing as much, but we always try our best to record and actually review what we did. But we have an open maker space. Our GitHub is open to the public. Right now, there's a book called the Robot Hacking Manual, and I'm trying to revise it a bit. It's been about 2 years since it was updated. A lot has changed in 2 years, and that's where these sorts of things, what even if they may seem easy, like what is the actual use of it, and what can people do to sort of protect themselves against this kind of stuff? Because de-authentication and sniffing attacks, while they may seem kind of scary at first, a lot of technology corporations and systems and other people already kind of like they've thought about these things as well, and that's kind of what I would like to sort of draft out to inside of that manual is these attacks do exist. Here's how to actually defend against it.
Um, firstly, thank you for this. My question may be a little broad, because I'm so new to understand about anything like this. So we've talked about how an individual may be attacked through means like this, and we also talked about like maybe the police breaking into people's houses, how it might affect people on the periphery. Is there anything people in your field are worried about on a much larger scale that people can do to maybe affect something like the entire city or something larger?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think the thing is any individual entry point is sort of an in. It can be it's an attempt to break a system. If you break one thing, then it's sort of like you can get into the pipes and you're now you can then traverse, which is a different like this is one attack and then you go on.
So have you ever heard of there's a thing called a virus called Stuxnet? Has anyone ever heard of it?
Ooh, that's a great Google search.
Yeah, how much time do we have?
Yeah. So,
oh yeah.
I mean, it's good to talk about it too.
Yeah, I'll go over just a small brief summary of it. But essentially, like it was a virus that infected a large SCADA system industrial system. Like it caused pipes to burst. It caused all sorts of havoc. And what they learned was that after the event, that all it took was someone plugging in a USB, and that's it. On that scale, like you could theoretically take down a city or an entire infrastructure if you simply just have it in. Cyber itself has become its own very interesting field of conflict, especially globally. And so, we sort of, at least from our perspective, and just even if you don't completely understand something, you should know that certain things exist. Keep your information safe, safeguard what you have, know your digital rights and what you can do. Yeah.
I was also noticing there was recently I think it was the New York Times article about the fact that there is 7 substations in the U.S. that if you're able to target them with cyber attack, you can pick up the entire U.S.'s power grid. And I mean, those are not explicitly disconnected. They didn't release, obviously, they didn't release which ones they are, but there was an analysis done somewhere in DOE, I think.
Yeah, so when a system is centralized, if you simply take out the support pillars for it, this is the way kind of hackers think. If I get in one way, how can I disable the larger thing, right? It's kind of like a game of chess. If I can disable one substation, can I disable the rest of the critical infrastructure the city runs on? And if so, how much chaos can that cause? Is how an attacker.
And that can go really quickly. It's not like someone having to coordinate blowing up stuff over the country and get physical material because everything is at basically the speed of light. We were talking earlier about the proliferation of Raspberry Pis as the back end of a lot of devices. If that has vulnerabilities, suddenly everything that we've developed on this could suddenly have new material put onto it by an adversary.
The biggest point of failure too is us or you. Regardless of how big or small you think you are personally, you have access to something that someone might want access to, and that they can get that through. Never forget that you could be a vector of that too. Which is why it's important for everyone to take this.
Who else had a question? Sorry.
I think I just wanted to know the name of the virus one more time.
Oh, Stuxnet. I can spell it for you. STUXNET.
Good book as well.
It's,
Oh my god,
it's
incredible.
Yeah. It is considered
What
the
was
most.
funny about that?
So this Stuxnet was written back in about, I want to say 2010, 2011. It's still considered to this day to be the most elegant piece of software that's been written.
Absolutely.
The crux of it was Stuxnet was a joint operation between U.S. intelligence and Israeli intelligence allegedly to take down Iran's nuclear program. The way that it did this was by any time that it got into a system, it looked to see if the system had certain configuration files that were only for Iranian nuclear facilities. This software had since been found proliferated all across the globe on like French nuclear systems, Russian nuclear systems, Chinese nuclear systems, but it was only looking for Iranian ones. And what it did, the reason why it was so insidious, is it was able to slowly speed up the centrifuges that they used for their ore refinement for uranium. And by speeding it up ever so slightly without telling the manufacturer or the operators, it basically broke all of the centrifuges so that the Iranians could no longer make weapons grade plutonium.
It delayed their production of weapons grade plutonium by years successfully.
So
before it was discovered.
It's incredibly insidious, beautifully elegant in a way.
And the only reason we know about Stuxnet, by the way, is not because like, oh, this became like a big international story because like Iran went public with this. It was found on other computer systems where it accidentally activated itself and caused like normal viral infection.
So the thing is like it would hide, right?
Yes.
It was very, very, very.
It wasn't.
It's insane.
It wasn't just inactive. If you did not have those Iranian centrifuge files, it would go, and then sleep until you inserted a USB into that device, and then it would copy itself onto the device and just continue to sleep.
Like I said, this is something we could talk about for like a half hour. It is insane how this software worked.
And this was something. When did this happen?
I want to say it was like 2012, 2011.
It was 2012. It was 2012 when it was discovered.
Yeah.
So it had been active for, I think at that point, years.
Yeah, like something like 4 or 5 years.
Right. So the journey between that and the discovery, and then the interval between that and now suggests that we probably, when we're talking on the scale of governments, are looking at many times that level of sophistication by now.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's fair to say. And already looking at it, it's just like the unfathomable degree of like human investment behind this thing.
So, just before I forget, Darknet Diaries. If you want to keep hearing stories like this, formatted really nicely, Darknet Diaries is a podcast. I think they have an episode on Stuxnet. Check out the Hacker Giraffe one. It's an important point of discussion. Because we're talking about how fast attacks can scale. This was a PewDiePie fan with a bash script. I'll say no more.
Any other questions?
Do we have one in the back somewhere?
Yeah, I know you were being patient about raising your hand.
Yeah, I was just, one of my questions was going to be like, given how like frequently like technology is changing, like where do you go to like keep up with things? And then I was also wondering about like the demonstration you mentioned like last night that you had to like do some work to like make sure that things were running still. Is there like ever going to be a point with your projects where like it reaches like a level of consistency and like reliability, or is that just the nature of like cybersecurity and like robotics, where it's just time intensive, like making sure that your systems are updated and like compatible with like current technologies?
Right. So that's a good question. Well, so robotics and cybersecurity is a very uncommon vector sometimes, like a field in general. Like you really won't find it unless you look for it. So for me, like I have to like sort of keep up with a lot of the changes that happen to certain systems, profiles. Is my Pi still up to date? Like these are things that have to happen consistently. It's why most like companies have support infrastructure to maintain those patches and updates in a timely fashion. Otherwise, you might be out of luck when your system just kind of fails. Will there be a point where it reaches consistency? Most likely, yes. It'll probably be somewhat of a probably more evolved iteration of it. Um, for me, this is like kind of like a starting point. It's going to be rough, but as instead of trying to jump straight over the hill, I'm trying to like go up it like steadily, making changes, updating things, keeping them like practical. That way, by the end of it, it's more refined.
I just want to hold that a little bit because while the hardware and stuff is going to probably reach maturity level, the actual attacks are probably already somewhat patched out.
Yeah.
Well, in terms of it's the thing that goes on in cybersecurity is a lot of arms racing, and I don't think that will change ever. I mean, it hasn't changed in lockpicking, except they've got to the point where it's the obscurity that's protecting it. As you said earlier, like protection by obscurity is not really protection, and compared to lockpicks where you have one person, one agent doing one thing, right? Cybersecurity is you can do a lot more with a lot less.
Automation is a beautiful, horrible thing.
Exactly.
Second you're online, if there's a profit motive from anyone, if it might not be worth it for someone in the US, anywhere else could look at something, it might be worth their time and figure out information.
It's really cool if you ever get the chance to work on a blue team. You can literally sit and watch an entire country scan the internet, right? And you'll see their packets come through, and you can set up things like honeypots, like purposely vulnerable systems set up to be monitored, and you can watch them get compromised in minutes, right? Because automation is a wonderful, horrible thing, right?
Going back to one of your previous questions, how to keep up to date with everything. I mean, what I kind of look at is just like what do companies release as their next products. Like I'll look at recordings of CES, the Computer Entertainment Show. I'll see all these new products and like how they sort of like operate. Just like looking at, and obviously I'll try to do my best to sort out like what is more practical and what's not. But just looking at raw data sometimes is the best, and just understanding like what something actually is doing and what it's capable of by getting some context from like Wikipedia or something.
So actually, real quick, if y'all find anything that you particularly like, send it to us so we can share it with people, right? So I mentioned Darknet Diaries. There's a bunch of other podcasts I like to listen to. These may not be specifically useful to you, but Risky Business and Security Weekly are two podcasts I listen to. They cover broad topics. However, if you find something that covers security from the perspective of your field, and you feel like sharing this, send it to us. We'd love to see it.
I'd like to. One more question, Henry.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh no, of course.
Kind of expand on that question she just asked. How can or how has policy kept up with this evolving?
It
doesn't. It hasn't.
No.
Not at all.
How can it?
Let me kind of backtrack that bit. So in security, there is a form of that in GRC, governance, risk, and compliance. There are people who specifically their whole job is to make sure something is within compliance of a certain policy and guideline. Those guidelines are, depending on the type of technology, do get researched by different scientific organizations like NIST or CIS, which is the Center for Internet Security, I think. And NIST is the National Institute of Security and Technologies Standards. You are right. Sometimes policy doesn't always keep up with changing technology because it changes so fast. But people are trying. They're trying to just understand, what is the technology actually doing? What guidelines can actually be implemented to better safeguard people's information and privacy? It's tough. It's hard, and I always say this. GRC guys or governance guys don't always get the most credit for what they do because they try their best to make sure like a system is within regards safe to the industry standards. I have done RMF before, which is risk management framework, understanding the risk associated with the technology and the system, and it can be tough because sometimes like you may have to just, especially if it's a new technology, you're gonna have to understand it first before you try to put a safeguard. Otherwise, you either might make the technology useless, or it will leave something kind of unchecked. It takes research.
So I want to tag on to this only because I have a bit of experience with this as well. So you asked how can policy keep up with it, and we were all said like disparaging remarks like, oh, it's crap, nobody's really keeping up with it, and that's sort of true, but it's not really. The problem is it's not one size fits all. There's not one policy that you put out there. One of the things that the government's been doing is, depending on the area of concern, different agencies have been able to enact their own cybersecurity standards. One of the big ones that came out a couple of years ago was called the Patch Act, PATCH, and it was done by the FDA. The FDA is the one that has also control over all of the cybersecurity, medical devices that go to market in the field. And the reason why this is important is this is like one of those policies that took almost like a decade to write, and it was written in such a way to actually give the government a bit of teeth to which fight back against the corporations. One of the ways that it does this with its policy is, say somebody like Johnson and Johnson or Medtronic, the people who make the great big like linear accelerator machines that you would use for cancer treatment. They used to make these machines, and they would spend maybe $1, $2, $3 billion researching it, bringing it to market. They used to be able to have the power to say, like, okay, it's going to go to market, we're going to sell it, and not support it at all. And security vulnerabilities would come up from it. People would be able to hack it. People would be able to either ransomware attacks, things like that. The government was able to come up with a policy in such a way of saying, like, no, we're going to just not allow you to bring this to market at all. You spent that $2 billion on nothing if you don't come up with a 10-year plan for how to support this after somebody has bought it. Like, I'm trying to give you like a bit more of a real world example of like how policy actually got enacted that is good for the consumers, good for the citizens, because now we have these extremely expensive machines that hospitals have to put a lot of capital into, and before there was basically no recourse if these got broken or broken into. And now the government has written a policy in such a way as to say, like, no, we're going to hold big business accountable to the citizens that have to rely on these machines to save their lives.
One very quick question. As hackers, you're kind of checking for ints, right? Have you noticed an area within your space where you say, we're missing some legislation here? There must be a lot, but like one you could point out to us.
AI.
Yeah, AI is probably the big one right now. It's a hot button topic. If anybody's keeping up with news, it is affecting all walks of life, whether it's technology, job market, government contracts is another huge thing. AI is not regulated whatsoever, really.
Yeah, there's
You mean generative AI?
Yeah,
generative AI. So AI itself, artificial intelligence, for people who, obviously, if you know what ChatGPT is, you use it. there isn't like a set standard currently
No.
for like a complete like so. In a lot of technologies, say like industrial or medical, there are standards that exist for those systems because they've been around for a while. Generative AI and AI itself it's a very brand new like territory because it not only is constantly evolving quite quickly. You know, people have different uses for it, and it's not like you said, it's not a one size fits all situation. How do you sort of regulate, say, like an AI model used for finance in the stock exchange versus an AI model used for imagery and like object detection? It's not a one size fits all situation. So you know, you need researchers and people who understand the field to better think about what sort of factors go into building these technologies and what risks are associated with them. I've done it before in think tank meetings where I'm in a room full of experts on aerial aircraft systems and drones, and just kind of bashing heads about what's the next big thing and how do we like go forward with this project. You have to be able to have people kind of talk to each other and understand what the foundational goal is of what you're trying to assess. It's tough, but that's why we do the work.
I think that's a great concluding note. Are some of these cards and
feel free.
information for people to have and to kind of keep in touch or maybe visit you all one day? And maybe I know we've done this like 3 times, but we can clap one more time, right? It's okay. So thank you all very much for coming today. Thanks for demoing. Thanks for sharing all your experience with us. And it's been great.
Thanks for having us.
Having you today.
having us.
Yeah. So
We appreciate it.
yeah, and if you all have questions or want to come up and chat, please do. So